which is entitled Expand Your Horizon. So to take us through that, we're going to be joined by Rimbilana Shingange, who is a lecturer and PhD candidate in the Department of Animal Science at the University of Pretoria. She's an alumna. She is an alumna of the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation Fellowship and the Mandela Rhodes Foundation Scholar. She's familiar with the dynamics of a leadership program that is designed for high-achieving, impactful individuals who use their education as their foundational pillar. That's not all. She's also subsequently established herself as a motivating and approachable lecturer early in her career, aiming to impart skills such as rational content analysis, while remaining firmly rooted in the practicalities of intersectionality. She values rational content analysis because of her experience in South African and international debating. As a former chairperson of the University of Pretoria Debating Union and operations manager at the South African Schools Debating Board, she has in-depth familiarity with the various contexts in which critical thinking and well-articulated analysis plays a role. Her favorite livestock to work with are cattle and sheep because she is quite afraid of all birds, including chickens. Maybe you can find out a bit more about that in her session. So please, a round of applause as we welcome her for the session to commence. Welcome.
Now it's on. Afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. You all look so scared. I don't know if you've never seen each other before, but I hope that you're getting to know each other within the foundation. Like I was introduced, I'm familiar with all things foundation, scholarship situations. There's nothing you can tell me there that I haven't experienced. So I hope that you are getting to a point of acknowledging the community and the network that you have the chance to build around you, because it's a rare opportunity. You are in a very privileged situation. So my presentation is about expanding your horizon. I'm going to teach you how to use some debating skills to upscale your critical thinking. We're going to define critical thinking, and on top of that, we're going to talk about why we're using debating as a platform for you to do so. You don't have to have been a debater, high school, varsity, none of that, but we're just translating some of those foundational skills into what you are doing now. So I'm going to, there we go. So my bio was already read, so a lot of the first part is repetition, but I'm going to briefly tell you who am I. We're going to talk about what is debating, and if you're more interested in the more formal side of the sport, we'll talk about how you can interact with the debating space, both locally and internationally. Then we'll talk about, this is where it gets interesting for you especially, where we talk about how debating skills are linked to critical thinking. Critical thinking is very much a buzzword nowadays. I don't know if on your MasterCard application it was there, saying they're looking for scholars who have critical thinking skills. That can be defined. It's not just a random or an arbitrary criteria that different foundations or even university schools use. It's a quantifiable metric that you can use to assess how someone is able to analyze a situation. And then our activity is going to be about logical fallacies. So that's why I mentioned in the beginning, I don't know if you're familiar with each other, but you're going to form little groups. You don't have to stand up or anything. We're going to look at an example. You try to identify the logical fallacy within there. And in that, you're practicing your ability to think critically. But we'll do that in detail in a moment. So there I am in the middle, years back. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Animal Science. I'm also doing my PhD. Hopefully we'll be graduating soon. I know one of your scholars, he's also in animal science there. I'm also the former chairperson of the University of Pretoria's Debating Union, and I'm a former board member of the South African Schools Debating Board, that's supposed to say board, and the World Schools Debating Board. So in terms of debating as a sport, locally, internationally, I've got you in terms of any logistics, any information you might need there. So if you do want to explore debating on a more formal basis after this, please get my email. We can talk about getting you involved there. But the gist of me explaining to you who I am is so that you understand why I'm the person giving you this session. If we're talking about how you expand your horizon, you have to contextualize it to yourself. Are there any undergrad students in the audience today? Honors? Masters? Mostly masters. Do we have PhD candidates in the audience? Okay. So you're all master's students, that's perfect. So at some point within your journey, whether you're doing a 2-year master's, you might have coursework and submit a dissertation after that, or maybe you're just doing a dissertation. At some point, you need to be able to think extremely critically, whether you're going to do a trial and actually have results and justify those results, or you're doing more of a literature review type of study where you're receiving data, you're not collecting it for yourself, or maybe you're doing a survey, whatever it is, you need to be able to use your skills or your logical reasoning to get to a conclusion. So all of this shows you, as a lecturer, also doing PhD, so I'm aware of the requirements of academia quite intimately, and I supervise master's students as well. But additionally, the debating part becomes relevant when we're talking about actual quantifiable skills that you have to be able to implement. So, quick question, what is debating? Anyone, when you hear the word debating, what do you think of? The first thing that comes to mind? Yes. Go for it, anything. Yeah, perfectly correct. Absolutely 100% correct. A debate can be me versus you. It can be presidential candidates like Biden and Trump did a few weeks ago. Or it can be more in a school setup like you're seeing there in the picture. 3 on a side, the third speaker there is the one at the podium. So when we actually define debating, we define it as a timed and structured academic speaking activity where 2 opposing teams make speeches to support their arguments about a given controversial topic. The definition might seem arbitrary now, but I'm going to link this to the dissertation that you're writing or will be writing within a few weeks or months, however long your master's is. But important to note here is the idea that when you have to interact with debating, whether you want to do it more on a formal basis, or if you just want to be stretching and practicing your critical thinking skills, you can do it essentially in 2 different formats. There's the World Schools debating style and the World Universities debating. World Schools debating is WSDC style, which you saw here, where it's here, 3 people on a side. Different debating circuits are more advanced than others, but luckily for you, the South African debating circuit is one of the top ranked in the world. We ranked 2nd at the World Schools Championships last year. So from that point of view, World Schools debating is mostly about high school students and how you would interact. You're obviously not in high school, so you'd probably be a coach for a high school or an adjudicator. I coach Pretoria Boys High School, I coach St. Mary's and Pretoria Girls High School. So even within the Hatfield area, there's a lot of potential if you want to interact with debating at that level. But in terms of World Universities debating, that's where my UPD experience became relevant. That's a British parliamentary style debate. The same way you have proposition and opposition, the difference with BP, so British parliamentary debate, is that it's 4 teams and each team has 2 people. But 2 of those teams are proposition teams, 2 of those teams are opposition teams. So just like with the 3-a-side here, one side says, yes, we agree, they're proposition. The other side says, no, we don't agree, we're opposition. With British parliamentary, it just means you have 2 teams proposing, 2 teams opposing. So instead of a winner and a loser, you have a ranking of teams from 1st to 4th. So you still compete with your other proposition team to prove that you are the better proposition team. A little bit more complicated, but some of the best debaters in the world come from this style of debating. And again, you would do that at universities, and how you would interact at that level would be maybe as a speaker or an adjudicator. I wasn't the best speaker for debating, but I was a brilliant adjudicator because I love to listen. The speaking part, not really my thing, especially under pressure, but I excelled quite well with the adjudication and then also with this box here. Whatever debating space you are in, whatever format of debating, there will be a chief adjudication panel. What do you think that means? Chief adjudication. So if we're saying an adjudicator is a judge, what do you think chief adjudication means? Pardon? Someone mumbled. Chief adjudication, what do you think that means? Logically, break down the word. Chief adjudication. Main judge, thank you. The chief adjudication panel is just a committee of people that decide the topics to be debated beforehand. They are the ones that essentially are running the debating aspect of the tournament, and the organizing committee runs everything else. What are people eating? What's our schedule? Where are people sleeping? Then equity panel, what is equity? When you say something is equitable, what does that mean? It's fair. Within a debating tournament, especially the university ones where it gets a bit more intense and personal, you need an equity panel to ensure that motions are fair, but also to protect participants. A lot of law students love being on the equity panel because they are able to say, okay, no, you were wrong, you were discriminatory, and we will be expelling you from the tournament, for example. So, those were different ways you can interact. A few more examples that we've spoken about. World Schools Debating, Gauteng Schools Debating Board, and other provincial boards. If you're not from Gauteng or primarily based in Gauteng, I would assume you are because you're at UP. There's other boards, Western Cape Debating Union, KZN, Free State. A lot of them are quite good within their spheres. Then you also have the South African Schools Debating Board. They do the more national level of debating. But with world universities, you'd be targeting a university union like UPDU, UJDU, WITS-DU, TUT-DU, all of them. And then there's also regional or continental boards where we're talking about the African schools, the African Universities Debating Council. Those are the more formal structures that we have in place for that. But even if you have no interest in being a part of formal debating, that's fine. That was just for the people who are keen. When we talk about how are debating skills linked to critical thinking, we're back at this definition. We've seen it before. So when we break it down now, each term there is a keyword. That's how when you get a topic in a debate, you have to break down each term. The same for your dissertation. At some point, you have to decide what are the important terms within my dissertation that I have to focus on within this 20-page document. So when we speak of debating still as being the verbal activity, it's timed, so you have to work within limitations. For you to be able to have this long list and have to say, I want to communicate A, B, and C within 7 minutes, that takes critical thinking to be able to condense what you need to say within that time. It's structured. Just like your dissertation, you don't just speak randomly. You don't just say, in conclusion, then you start with an introduction after that. You need to be able to allow the reader or the listener in the instance of debating to follow your train of thought. After that, it's academic. All of your dissertations here will be academic. Whatever faculty you're in, you are rooted in theory. Then speaking for debating, it's a verbal expression. And then here I just did the asterisks for 2 opposing teams because British parliamentary is different. But the idea here is that you're going to support your argument. In debating, it's a specific side. But when we speak about your dissertation, you are most likely going to be having some type of data, some kind of results that you are using existing literature to justify the existence of. Then, when we quickly define what critical thinking is, did you receive this printout that you see here? You didn't receive it. Okay, no, it's fine. We can go through it. We'll send it to you after. But this is an excerpt that has different definitions of critical thinking from different theoretical frameworks. And before we quickly talk about those examples, let's define critical thinking, straight from dictionary.com. All of you have it on your phones. When we say something is critical, it means it's inclined to find fault or to judge with severity, often too readily. That's not a bad thing. Being critical isn't always that you are harsh or you are mean. It just means that you pick things out quickly. That's the readily part. It involves criticism or skillful judgment as to truth or merit. For a lot of your dissertations, you have to prove the merit of something. If you're a law student, you're tackling the accuracy of a specific act within our constitution, you are evaluating its merit. If you're a NAS student in chemistry and you want to figure out what solvent is best for whatever type of analysis, you are figuring out the validity of that solvent. Additionally, when we define critical, it means of decisive importance with respect to the outcome. It's also something we call crucial. So when Dr. Ndoro says that in a working environment, you have to be someone who's valuable, that's why this links to that. If everything you say is kind of a wavy repetition of what everyone else said, you never say anything new or crucial, you're not a critical thinker, you're just a regurgitator. Critical thinking means that you are able to find out and pick up points of information and make conclusions, not necessarily that no one else would, but conclusions that are crucial. So even if it's you and your friend that make the conclusion, that's fine. But without your contribution, the conclusion would be different. That's the idea with being a critical thinker. Then, what is thinking? Simple. It's rational, it's reasoning, it's you being thoughtful or reflective. So when you combine these two terms now, we move on to what this table was saying. If we're breaking down what or who a critical thinker is, a critical thinker will differentiate and evaluate theories and approaches to selected complex problem within their chosen field of study and at least one other field. Keywords there, it's the differentiation and evaluation of theory. Have any of you done your literature reviews yet? I saw a few nods. What's a literature review? Can someone who nodded, you nodded for us in the blue. Can you tell everyone what a literature, sorry, no one else is raising their hand. Can you tell everyone what a literature review is? Just a brief gist of it. Perfectly correct. A literature review, when you break down the term, you are reviewing literature. Existing literature on whatever your field of study is, you are going to review what different authors have said. Maybe you're even including a chronological assessment. So you're saying back in the 80s, we viewed constitutions as being like this. That view shifted in the 90s to the 2000s to the 2010s. A literature review is you being able to compare, number one, but to also differentiate. There's a difference between comparison and differentiation that's a part of critical thinking. Comparison says, A said this, author A said this, author B also said this. Thank you. Differentiation is, author A said this, that is not the same as author B saying this. Differentiation is literally spot the difference. You know those games we used to play in the newspaper or the magazine when we were younger, and you find the two cartoons, the one lady doesn't have a hat, the other one doesn't have a balloon. That's differentiation. You're finding the differences because that's critical analysis. It's you being able to absorb information and to process it well enough that you notice that, oh, this is something that's different. Are you following? Okay. Then, so that was more for a bachelor's level according to this author. But when we now move on to master's level, all of you said your masters. The critical thinking is disaggregation, reformulation, and adaptation of principal ideas, techniques, or methods at the forefront of the field of study in carrying out an essay or a project. Take a moment, process that. That's what you're supposed to be doing now. Read it again. What does that definition mean to you? Just read it again. So from here, disaggregates, reformulates, and adapts principal ideas, techniques, or methods at the forefront of the field of study in carrying out an essay or a project. Does that mean anything to anyone? Or are the words just passing through? What does that mean when you read that? You're a master's student. What do you think that definition is telling you you have to be doing by the time you stand on stage and graduate from your master's? Yes? Yeah, perfectly correct. You're not now at a bachelor's level where you have a million modules, you have many exams. You're now doing masters. So even if you have coursework, you don't have 11 modules of coursework. You probably have 3 or 4. And the idea there is whether you have coursework or you're completely doing your research, if it's a research-based master's, you have to disaggregate. What is disaggregation? What is aggregation? Yes, aggregation is when something is put together. It is an aggregate of different things. Disaggregation is the opposite of that. That means you are breaking something down. So within your entire topic, let's say in NAS, for example, let's say you are researching effective mosquito repellents, for example. Your aggregated information is to say that there are 3 different compounds that would work as mosquito repellents. When you disaggregate that information, that means that you are breaking down why those are the 3 compounds compared to other compounds. So you are finding that maybe the ones literally just kill the mosquitoes, they drop dead. Others are a deterrent to mosquitoes. Others make the mosquitoes feel sick. Whatever your field of study is, disaggregation is you taking a body of consensus or information, breaking it down to the why, and then linking that to what you are doing. Then reformulation. What's reformulation? What's formulation? What's a formula? Ooh, what's formulation? Formulation. Break down the word. What is to formulate? Yes. You build up something. You're overthinking it. You build up something. Formulation is literally just the idea that you say, to get X, I need A plus B plus C. Reformulation is you tweaking that to your masters now, to your context. You're not going to rediscover the field of chemistry or the field of constitutional law. That's not going to happen in your masters. But what you are trying to prove is that what you are contributing is a fundamental part of the original formula towards that field of study. Does that make sense? So you're not going to say, here's a new constitution for South Africa, I wrote it in 2 years. No, that's not what you're doing. But you are going to point out and say, within the context of, let's say, domestic abuse, you feel that this act should be modified to account for whatever new information has come up recently. We together, still following. Then you're going to adapt principal ideas. The important thing here, apart from ideas, techniques, or method, is the principal part. It's literally what we just spoke about now with the literature review. You entering now in this field, whatever field you are in, you're not at the beginning of the field, you're not a pioneer, which means that you're relying on OGs from way before you who have established that principal information. That means that you're not going to call them out and say, no, they are all wrong. But you are going to use what they have established as a foundation to either back yourself up or to prove how you are better within your dissertation. Still together? Okay. Then, the last definition we're going to look at here, it's the idea that students, so this was more of a bachelor's level, but it's the idea that students completing the first cycle qualification can apply their knowledge, so whatever theory you have in your mind, all those nights of cramming within textbooks, and understanding in a manner that indicates a professional approach to their work or vocation. Think to what Dr. Ndoro was teaching you about now with occupational psychology. You still have to be professional, because even if you end up within academia now after your master's, that is a profession. So you still have to be professional. You also need to have the competencies that will be typically demonstrated through devising and sustaining arguments and solving problems within your field of study. What is devising? Creating, it's formulation. So it's you being able to on a routine basis, show that you are able to come up with things or links or conclusions. At the same time, sustain those arguments. You need to back yourself up. So whatever you are doing in the workplace or even your dissertation, it can't be this once-off miraculous thing that has no backing and is not sustainable. You need to be able to back up your argumentation. On top of that, you need to have the ability to gather and interpret relevant data to inform judgments that include reflection on relevant social, scientific, or ethical issues. 2 things in that sentence. Number 1, you need to gather and interpret relevant data. Gathering, mostly now on our laptops, is normally a Google search, Google Scholar, whatever search engine you're using, but it needs to be relevant, right? So I can't now use theory from 1950 when that science has been disproven before I was born. That's not relevant anymore. At the same time, you need to be able to interpret. You having a folder on your, I don't know how many of you have this, but I had it for masters. I had this folder of just many articles. Some of them I never even opened. because some of them weren't relevant. It was these random studies. So my bio said I'm scared of chickens because I'm in livestock. So I work a lot with cattle and sheep right now. Chickens, not really my thing. But there were a lot of papers during my master's where the scientific concept was across species, but because they all function so differently, you can't apply the science to different species. So it ended up being irrelevant. Do some of you have a folder like that, just where you save all of those papers from Google Scholar, you barely go back? That one, go and see what's irrelevant, just delete them if you're not going to use them. Then, this last part here is linked to intersectionality, because you need to inform judgments that are going to include a reflection on relevant social, scientific, or ethical issues. Why would it be called intersectionality? Can someone define intersectionality for us? Probably people in the humanities. Yes, are you humanities? No, it's fine. No, go for it. Go for it. No stand-up, no pressure. Go for it.
Intersectionality, basically the overlapping of different, should I say, topics and contexts.
Mm-hmm.
Being a black, foreign woman,
Mm-hmm.
queer woman.
Yes.
Intersectionality.
Absolutely correct. So when we speak of intersectionality, we're referring to intersectionality amongst people. So when I'm comparing myself, let's say, as a young black woman from Limpopo who is dark-skinned, there are certain social parameters that would affect me differently than a white, wealthy woman from the Western Cape. Does that make sense? That's intersectionality with regards to people. However, when we're talking about more the scientific domain or the more academic domain, we translate that to mean interdisciplinaryism. Sorry, the English ran there. It's about being interdisciplinary. So that means that as a critical thinker, you are someone who's able to reflect on relevant issues in other spheres that may not be your expertise, but you're able to acknowledge that those spheres may influence what you are working on. An example would be if you say that load shedding, if you say that ESCOM, if you say that all of ESCOM's issues are simply because of corruption, full stop. Is that true? Part of it, yes, but it's not the full story. Corruption may have played a role, maybe in how power stations are being maintained, but when we speak about interdisciplinaryism, we're talking about, have service providers been incentivized to supply coal? Have service providers been incentivized to keep up maintenance programs? That's where you start looking at other spheres that might be affecting what you are talking about. For all of your dissertations, at some point, you will acknowledge something that has to do with being interdisciplinary. And that's a part of critical thinking. It's you showing that you are able to step out of your own little bubble of expertise and go beyond that to come up with something that is crucial and critical within that sphere. Still together. Okay. Then, this one I just threw it in to conclude this part. It's a student who's able to critically evaluate arguments. We're going to talk about arguments now. Assumptions, abstract concepts and data, even data that's incomplete, to make judgments and to frame appropriate questions to achieve a solution or identify a range of solutions to a problem. So this seems like you're inventing new things, not necessarily. It just means that ultimately you are going through a process where you are able to accept information, condense it, evaluate it, and decide what is relevant. Does that make sense? Okay. So here, going back, your dissertation, instead of it being timed in terms of verbal time, you might have some or other page or word limit. On top of that, it will still be structured. You need to have a front cover, you need to have a key list of abbreviations, you need to have a table of contents, however that may be. It's an academic piece of writing as opposed to speaking. And here, instead of you being against someone, that is you supporting your arguments that could be, for example, your study results about a given topic. Does that make sense? Sometimes your supervisor will feel like they're the opposing team. That's okay. They're working with you to get to the right answer, but it's still you working towards a certain conclusion. Okay, so the activity. As you're sitting now, Just find a buddy, whether you're turning around or the person next to you. And essentially, you're going to see an excerpt on the screen. We're going to do the first one together so you're following. Then, you and your group are going to have a few minutes to talk about what logical flaw do you see within the excerpt. We're talking about logical flaws because we're going to talk about the definition in a moment. But the idea is that if you're thinking critically, before you are able to say, I'm a critical thinker, because it's not something you are born with, you have to actively practice critical thinking. That's why your first year in debating is a bit nonsense compared to your last few years. You've just practiced it enough times that you know how to identify certain things. Then, two groups will share their perspectives. This is not an exhaustive, 10-minute speech. It's more, we think the error here was ABC. I'll show you if I agree with that error, because I have them all listed, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay. So, why are we doing logical flaws? Because of logical fallacies. When you define a fallacy, it's the use of invalid or otherwise faulty reasoning in the construction of an argument that may appear to be well-reasoned if unnoticed. And remember now, we're not talking just about you being able to think. You made it this far, you can think. We're leveling you up to being a critical thinker, where you don't just get information and you're like, bet, I trust because it's on Google Scholar. You are able to condense that information and read it for what it is comprehensively. So you're able to say, I'm not sure I agree with that, or I agree to it to an extent. Make sense? Okay, so we're going to do the first one together. Oh, here, noticing a fallacy will allow you to reason in a matter that avoids illogical or misplaced conclusions. Masters doesn't have defenses, but when you get to PhD, you have a PhD defense. UP recently brought it back just in time for me. It's a PhD defense, and essentially after you submit your thesis, you have to, you present, and you say, this was my thesis. This is what I did for the past 3 years of my life. Are you passing me? Terrible process, very nerve-wracking, but the idea is, if you are a critical thinker and you're able to avoid logical fallacies, you won't say something in that defense or even in your written dissertation that the marker puts a question mark and is like, this makes no sense. How did you get to this conclusion? That's the idea here. Okay. So, we're going to do the first one together. This is the argument. It says that human beings have always eaten meat throughout history. Therefore, eating meat is morally correct. Take a moment and process that. Ask your friend, do you think this is perfectly 100% correct? Quickly ask your friend, then I'll show you the answer. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
How are
Vanilla.
you?
Nice to meet you.
I'm so sorry. When you're speaking, I'm going to get you a mic.
Okay.
Just a roaming mic for the feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Does any pair or group have a guess for us? Let's start with this. Does anyone think this is perfectly 100% logical reasoning? Anyone? Yes, sir. I see a group there. They can have the mic and they can explain to us.
Okay, I want to say the argument is not logically right because it's saying eating meat is morally right. You're trying to say that people don't eat meat are immoral. So morality is like subjective, because if you say, if I eat meat, it means I'm moral, or eating meat is moral. You're saying that those not eating meat is immoral, but that other people don't eat meat, don't see the situation that way. So it's really subjective, so it's not logical.
Absolutely correct. It's subjective. But when you look at this reason, the excerpt tells you the justification for this argument is that it has always been eaten throughout history. Is that a valid justification? I saw you shake now. Do you want to tell us why? They're bringing the mic to you now.
So I disagreed because not everything that humanity does should be considered morally right just because they do it. And I gave her an example of witchcraft. At some point, humans were killing witches. And just because they were doing it doesn't mean it's morally right. So, yeah.
And everything throughout history isn't right. Like, there's so many instances in history where human beings could have made better decisions that have led to where the world is. So just because it was done in history doesn't mean it's right. Yeah.
Humans were eating other things as well throughout history. Like, where do we stand on that if this is morally right?
Kim, so the spectrum across that could exist across. Perfectly correct. So we call this a naturalistic fallacy. So after each example I show you and your friend discuss, I will show you what we formally term that type of logical flaw. So this one we just talked about now is called a naturalistic fallacy, and the idea there, it's trying to derive conclusions about what is right or wrong about values simply from statements of fact alone. So the idea here is that the argument suggests that because meat consumption is a natural part of human history, therefore it's morally acceptable. That's never a justification for anything. There's so many loopholes to that justification. So whether you're in law, whether you're in engineering, even if you want to justify and say, why is eating meat correct? It's very difficult to do that from a moral standpoint. Like our other scholar there said, it's very subjective. So rather in that instance, you justify the benefits versus disadvantages of eating or not eating meat. Not from a moral standpoint, but you saying, for example, white meat has this certain proportion of protein that would be beneficial to a growing child, for example, as opposed to don't eat meat because we can't kill other animals. That moral standpoint is very unlikely to fly, especially if you're submitting it as an academic stance. So do we get the idea of the activity? Okay, so we're going to go through 10 of these. I'm going to show you an example. You have a few minutes with your friends, you discuss. We go through how we define that fallacy. So that's the hint, right? All of them are some type of fallacy. Okay. There we go. Example number 2. So some of them are scenarios, some of them are arguments. The African National Congress proposes a new healthcare policy aimed at expanding access to affordable healthcare. That's the scenario. But another party says, so this is the argument the other party gives, they say, we shouldn't listen to the ANC's healthcare policy ideas because the ANC has a history of financial mismanagement and corruption. Talk to your friend. Do you think that's a valid way of discounting that claim? Talk to your friends quickly. Okay, does anyone want to give us an idea? Yes, go for it. Can you use mine?
All right, awesome. So me and my friend here, we sort of looked at the scenario, and the justification for not agreeing with the policy has absolutely nothing to do with the actual policy, but the justification focuses on the subject, which is the ANC, and not necessarily what the ANC is proposing. So what's that word?
Ad hominem. I'm not pronouncing it well, but I think it's an ad hominem fallacy.
Perfectly correct. Does anyone else have another justification? So you all heard the scholar, right? The idea that the problem with the justification here is that they're targeting the ANC as opposed to targeting the NHI, the National Health Insurance. Do you all agree with that? Do you think there's something else there? Yes. We'll come to you now.
Yeah, I just want to add, I'm not trying to disagree. I want to add on that.
Yeah.
The problem with the statement also, it says we shouldn't listen to ANC's healthcare policy because the ANC has a history of financial management and mismanagement and corruption.
Yeah.
No, whether ANC is corrupt or whatever, we still need to understand the policy. So we should listen to it for understanding purposes, because how are you going to disagree with something that you don't understand? So you still need to understand the policy, whether you like ANC or not.
Yeah.
So that's illogical for me.
Okay. We have another scholar there.
I agree with what my fellow political scientists are saying.
Yeah.
So for me is that it kind of like gives us the sense that our own politicians have shifted away from the idea of actually helping people and actually seeking to advance their own interests. So for the fact that they're saying because the ANC has a history of financial mismanagement and corruption, and not actually focusing on the policy itself, it just really shows that it actually kind of like raises the question, what is politics? Who is it for? Who is it beneficial for? Is it them, the political elites, or it's us as the citizens?
Okay, lovely. Okay, we have two more hands there. We can take, you were sitting together, so can we take one of you? Oh, you disagree? Okay, no, sorry, let's listen to both of you then. Let's debate it. Oh, sorry, there was someone else. We'll come to you now. Yes.
Yes, I disagree
Yeah?
too.
Okay, why?
Because the policy is tabled in parliament by the legislature.
Just put the mic, please.
I was saying that the policy is tabled by the legislature in parliament, which is the representative of the public.
Okay.
And now the aim of the policy is to expand access to affordable healthcare to everyone.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't negate the implementation of the policy based on history, that there is financial mismanagement and corruption.
Yeah.
That will always be there, and my argument is that we shouldn't use history to judge what can happen in future.
Okay, so you're including the naturalistic fallacy that history doesn't set a precedent.
Yes.
Perfect, okay. Okay, let's take our two scholars who disagree. There's many examples, so you'll have an opportunity.
Thank you.
Actually, this is what my research is based on. I'm investigating the National Health Insurance Policy.
Okay.
Yeah. So, my okay, my member here, right? He's disagreeing. He's saying that history matters. So, according to my study or whatever that I have gathered so far, is that we can't just erase the fund out of the table just because of history, because we have to go to the basis of why that policy or the fund was introduced, which was to bridge the gap between the poor and those who can afford and everything like that. So we have to look at what does this fund aims to do, which is to bring the gap, and we can't deny the fact that the healthcare there's no healthcare quality in South Africa. So yeah, we can't. I don't know how to articulate that, but then we can't.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes?
so I think there's a fine line between being objective,
Yeah.
which is in the case of the policy being introduced, and
Yeah.
being realistic,
Okay.
which is the subject who's introducing the objective matter. So basically, I mean, if you look at the history of the ANC, it clearly stipulates that they have a history of mismanaging funds and there's corruption. So then we're going to use that to forecast what they're going to do with the funds in the future, which is most probably misuse the funds. I'll bring it home. I'll make a perfect example. If you, sorry, this is out of context, but you'll get what I'm trying to say. So basically, if there's a guy who keeps on cheating all the time,
Okay.
and then he comes to you, are you gonna give him that chance and say, "Oh no, I'm different"? So
Okay.
therefore,
Okay, let's flag it there. There's many examples, but I think I like this conversation because, and I'm going to speak about what the law scholar just said now, but the rest of you are perfectly correct. Your scholar in the front used the exact term. It's called an ad hominem fallacy. Ad hominem, you know, Homo sapiens, that same prefix. It's about you targeting the person as opposed to the argument itself. And the idea here is that, that's what I just said, the error of attacking the character or the motives of a person who has stated an idea rather than the idea itself. So there's two arguments now as we're discussing that came up. It's the idea that you can't just dismiss what someone says because of who they are firsthand. First, analyze and understand what are they saying as a primary level. Secondary to that, you speak about motives and intention. And that's where the scholar who just spoke now came in. As much as yes, NHI might have its own merits in and of itself as a policy, you are allowed to question if its implementation might be affected by who proposes it. But that is not a reason to discount the validity of the policy itself. Now you're talking about implementation of the policy. That's two different things. Just like in your dissertation, this dissertation aims to prove that I was thinking of an engineering one and I couldn't think of a single thing. This dissertation aims to prove that oxytocin is an effective muscle contractant, right? So if that's your dissertation aim, that's lovely, you make that your aim. But at some point, you can also within your dissertation discuss that the route of administration matters. If it's a pill of oxytocin, if it's an injection of oxytocin, if it's a drip of oxytocin, that would also matter in terms of the result that you achieve. Does that make sense? So that's the distinction here. Yes, sometimes just it's enough to say this person has these motives, but it's never a reason to dismiss that person's argument or policy. First, dismiss the argument or policy on its own merits, then you add on and say, yeah, look who's even bringing it up. It definitely won't work out. Do you see the link there, or the difference actually? Okay, next example, are you ready? Okay, example number 3. The argument is, ghosts and extraterrestrial life must exist because it has never been proven that they do not exist. Talk to your friend. Yes,
Would you like the papers to be distributed?
We passed the slide, but you can hand it up to them to go home with. Then they can read, no problem. Or the activity, oh no, it's okay. You can just hand it out for them now. Okay, does anyone have a guess for us? Your hand went up very quickly, so you can go first. Let's listen to the scholar.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, like my partner and I were saying that usually things are proven once they are tangible. So once it doesn't exist, then what's the need to prove that it's there or not there? Like, for example, if I'm going to talk about cryptocurrency, for example, I'm discussing something that's already there, like it's known. But if I am going to talk about something that's not there, you know, like you prove something that's there. Essentially, that's what I'm saying, yes. Yeah. Yes, evidence.
Sorry, thank you. What we basically discussed, we said that the fallacy there is that the person is using the fact that something hasn't been proved to say that it definitely does exist. And we use the example of the maths equation. What happens on the right side must happen on the left side, if that makes sense.
Anyone else? Where's the other mic? There was another, yes, ma'am, there was another mic.
Oh, you don't want to speak?
Our point that you raised is that that use of the word must, it's now too specific and you're now saying that it is. At least if maybe the word must was might, it could be a better statement. But must is now a strong word to be used. I'm just emphasizing how strong it is.
Also, they say because it has never been proven, they do not exist. You know? So the fact that you haven't proven something otherwise doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. For example, some of us, you know, especially the people who were born in the X generation, they were born at home, not in the hospitals. How do you know that person has a heart? Because you have not proven they have a heart, but they live. You know, I'm being honest. You haven't proven it, but you believe they have a heart. So you can't make that statement to say because you haven't proven that otherwise then it doesn't exist. Well, I have a heart, but I haven't checked.
Okay. There's a scholar there and also behind you.
For me, I just feel like in this world, if there's something that seems to not be true, it is probably true. I don't know. I just feel like Ray. So maybe there are ghosts. Yes, we haven't seen them. No one has proven it. But then what if they are?
Okay.
'Cause it
So do
seems
you
like it's
agree
not
with this
true.
argument?
Not that I'm agreeing, but I'm just saying that
Yeah.
the way I perceive life and experiences thus far is that something that seems not to be true
could be true.
Could be true.
Not is true.
No, could be. Probably.
Could be true.
Yeah, that's why the
Probably.
guy also emphasized on the word must. Yeah, that word
Okay.
must is a problem.
Okay, we'll come back to it, but there's a very big difference between could be and probably is true. Massive difference, but we'll come back to it now. There was someone towards the back. Yes, he was, yeah.
Thank you. I think that my problem with this statement is that it's suggesting that if it's not A, then it could be B. It must be B. We don't know if there is only A and B. There could be A, B, C, D, E, F. We don't know how many other options are there. So maybe there is ghosts, maybe there is no ghosts, maybe there is semi-ghosts, maybe there is, you know. So I think the option of if this is not correct, then this should be is too. It's you are saying you're dividing life into part A or part B. There could be other notions that are not A or B.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. They're coming to you now. Yes.
No, I think for me, this is an argument with a shaky foundation because it's premised on a rebuttable proposition that if it has not been proven, then they must exist if they have not been disproved. But if one person disproves what the proposition is saying, then the whole argument falls apart. So it's more like people who say they don't believe in God because they haven't been proven that he does exist. But if you take them to the Bible and prove to them that, or to nature, for example, and show them nature and all the evidence that is before them, and then all what they believe falls away.
Okay. Can I flag that one? There's another example that's coming up with the exact thing of religion. Can I flag that one? We'll come back to you when that one comes up. Yes, sir, in the yellow. Oh, sorry, you were first. Sorry, continue.
I would say I do not agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Why? Because I'll take you back to the scientific world. If I look at that door handle, I would not say there are no germs on that handle unless I prove it. So when I look at that, I would say they do exist or they do not. So it's midway, yes or no. No, because it has not been proven. And yes, because
It has not been proven.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I like that one. Okay, let's go to sir in the yellow, and then last hand would be the lady in the purple.
Can I try some form of a little bit of activity?
Okay.
So what if I were to say we all agree with that, but we are not aware?
We all agree with it.
With the argument, but we are not aware.
Okay.
So who in here doesn't believe that they have a soul?
Doesn't believe.
Yes, that they have a soul.
So who thinks they don't have a soul?
Yes. Okay, but has there been like a proof that for a human being to exist, they need a soul?
Yes.
Yes.
I said yes. I'm the one who said yes.
There's proof.
You also believe so? Yes, I once read so I know I'm drifting from your activity, sorry. I once read a study that so they were having people who are at the point of death, they put them in a vacuum chamber that can weigh, and at the point of death, they noticed a decrease in weight. So they assumed that that was the soul leaving the body. But of course, it's not like the soul was like, hi, I'm the soul. They just noticed a decrease in weight, but shifted. But I understand what you're trying to say. You're trying to say that some things we just instinctively believe, even without empirical evidence.
Okay.
Is that what you're trying to say? I shifted, I disproved your activity, and I'm so sorry. But you...
In a way, but then that doesn't prove that it is the soul that reduced the weight.
Exactly. That's why we're coming now to this
Yes.
activity. It's what the scholar in the front was saying. There's an in-between. There's a yes, there's a no. There can be something in between. Yeah. Who else? Do you still want to say something? Okay.
I was just going to say with like Newton's law of gravity, gravity always existed. It was always there. It just, he had to prove it by theorizing and coming up with the formula. And then once he theorized it and proved it, then we had actual proof. So even with something like ghosts or something, it would just take someone theorizing or coming up with some sort of formula to prove their existence. And then from there on, we would know whether it's there or it's not.
Yeah. Perfectly correct. So everyone's contribution has been valuable because we classify this fallacy as an appeal to ignorance. We call it an appeal to ignorance because it's assuming something is true simply because it hasn't been proven false. And what all of you are saying about the spectrum falls in here. So just because there is no empirical evidence for something being yes, but there also is no empirical evidence for something being no, it doesn't mean that it can't fall somewhere within that spectrum. And this seems a little bit more scientific, but even if you go to more humanities scholars, who maybe you're going to be doing something like a survey. So maybe you're surveying people, but you're not just going to say, hi, how are you feeling? And they give you a whole lot of words. You might ask them to, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you feeling happy or are you feeling sad? Because you're trying to quantify that feeling into evidence that can be translated or applied to other research participants. Do you see how that works? So just because the person didn't use the word, I am happy, but they say, I am number 10 today, I'm feeling good. Those things are different terminologies, but the evidence is the same foundation. Does that make sense? Okay, next one.
about Greta. So Greta Thunberg has advocated that we should have stricter regulations on industrial pollution to protect the environment. The argument you are analyzing is person B's response, who says, Greta wants to shut down all factories and put everyone out of work. Talk to your friend. Is that what Greta was saying? Talk to your friend. How would you explain that? How would you articulate that? This one shouldn't take too long. Okay, does anyone have a way to articulate what you think about this? Yes, sir. Where's the, oh, there. Thank you. Is it on?
First thing first is that the person is out of context. Greta's talking about the regulations of the industrial pollution. He's talking about jobs and shutting down factories. That's not what they say. They're talking about restricting the regulations, and he's talking about shutting down factories and putting everyone out of work. That's already like out of context. And also, the Greta is talking about the practicalities of the industry, not the people. For example, they would say, we've banned so many fossils this year, and then next year we want to ban less. That's the practicality, which they're talking about stricter regulations. He's talking about jobs. It doesn't mean that they're going to retrench people or shut down the factories.
Does anyone else? Who's closer? Can use this one.
So my response is, I think the person B is not getting it right, because first of all, what Greta is saying is in comparative mode, where you see he says stricter. So it's not the strictest, if we were to go that direction. And the person B then responds saying that Greta wants to shut down all, which means like it's superlative and send everyone. So that is not what the person was saying.
Absolutely. So the scholar's response now, we'll elaborate on it more.
Sorry. So I would say this is a strawman's fallacy, in the sense that person B firstly misrepresents the argument being made and then proceeds to refute the distorted version of the argument. Thank you.
I kind of feel like you have a copy of my notes. Yeah, because you knew that one. Because it is a straw man fallacy. A straw man fallacy is when you refute a caricatured or extreme. You know what a caricature is? You know those cartoons in the newspaper where, who's that guy, the famous South African guy? He used to draw Zuma with the shower head. Zapiro, yes, you know the Zapiro cartoons? That's caricatures, very exaggerated versions of people. So a straw man is refuting that version of somebody's argument rather than the actual argument. And when we go back to it, Greta is advocating for stricter regulations on industrial pollution. That can look like factories having to emit less greenhouse gases, electricity producers having to burn less fossil fuels. That's one of the many different ways it could manifest. But this person goes to the extreme and they say, these regulations are going to be so strict that all of the factories are going to have to close. No one can possibly function with lower emissions not burning coal. Therefore, everyone will be unemployed. Do you see how extreme that is? And a lot of people actually do this in dissertations. You find someone writes down and they say, this author said, for example, with animals, my expertise there. They say that when you put an animal in a crush, for example, so one of those holders on a farm, you cause them stress. So now someone in this dissertation comes and says, the stress is so bad that animal will die. You can't ever put them in the crush because the stress will always give them a heart attack. There's a spectrum along which those effects could manifest, and it's disingenuous to always go to the extreme version and then argue for the extreme version. Make sense? Okay, another one. Millions of people believe that astrology accurately predicts their future, so there is truth to it. Ask your friend, we've done something similar, but there's a nuance here that's different to the one we did before. I saw that time. Okay, what do you think? We spent a bit of time on the first two, so let's take 2 people for each example. There's about 10 of them, so you'll have more than enough time. The lady at the back with the scarf.
I disagree
Why?
with the statement because astrology is pseudoscience, and just because a majority of people agree with something, it doesn't make it fact.
Okay.
That's just.
Okay. Does anyone else have something different, or you more or less agree?
I don't agree, but I would say let's draw from the naturalistic fallacy in that history doesn't set a precedent. So just because people have held it to be true doesn't mean there's actually truth to it. Historical practice is not really a sound basis for substantive truth.
Perfectly correct. So the idea here is, and you'll notice with a lot of these, there will be intersection. There isn't a single example that solely belongs to that type of fallacy, because depending how you interpret it, you can interpret it differently. This one is what the first scholar said. It's an appeal to numbers or popularity or the masses, and the idea there is that you're trying to prove something by showing how many people think that it's true. So you are saying, so many people believe it. How can it not be true? Many people can be wrong. I'm not saying astrology is wrong, but as an argument for saying that astrology is accurate and able to predict their future, you can't use the number of people who believe it as an argument to justify that it's accurate. For you to be able to justify that, you need a database. You need to find Geminis, Capricorns, and you say, the horoscope says that all Geminis will win the lotto in May. If you don't have a significant number, p less than 0.05, that actually win the lottery, it's not true. Does that make sense? But it's not because millions of people believed it. That doesn't matter, because millions of people can be wrong. Okay. So that was this one. Here, the little bubble I put there, the number of people who believe in astrology does not provide evidence for its accuracy or truth. Scientific validity is determined by empirical evidence and rigorous testing, not by the popularity of a belief. This is not just science. So even the engineers, the humanities scholars, even when you are proving whatever it is you're doing in your dissertation, you're not going with most people believe. You still need to find some other basis of argumentation. Okay. Next one, Thabo Mbeki. From 1999 to 2008, Thabo Mbeki and his presidential administration implemented policies that denied antiretroviral drugs to AIDS patients and promoted the use of herbal remedies like garlic and beetroot as an alternative to treat AIDS. Therefore, this administration proved that HIV does not lead to AIDS. Talk to your friend. You all frowned. Articulate that frown. What does that mean? Talk to your friend, articulate your disagreement. Quickly, 30 seconds. Quickly ask your friend what you think or why you think that it's wrong. Okay, we had a hand that was up towards the left. Was it you? Can you please give to the scholar? She's here in the front. Ma'am, if you can please raise your hand, just so he can find you, yeah. Yes, what do you think?
I would call it an appeal to authority because a lot of people did believe that beetroot was in fact a remedy to HIV and AIDS just because Thabo Mbeki and Naledi Pandor said it was going to assist them, it was going to cure the virus.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have something different? Okay, yes.
Can I say something?
Sorry.
I would say that I disagree with that statement being true because they haven't drawn a direct correlation between the use of herbal remedies for the treatment of HIV and HIV not leading to AIDS. So it talks about the management of HIV, this use of herbal remedies, not necessarily the progression from HIV to AIDS itself.
Perfect. So there's an intersection with this one as well. The first part is an appeal to authority, perfectly correct. It's when someone tries to demonstrate the truth of a proposition by citing some person who agrees, even though that person may have no expertise in the given area, even in the instance of valid counter-scientific evidence. The idea there is, number one, yes, we don't like that Thabo Mbeki has no knowledge of any microbiology or disease biology at all. But even on top of that, in the presence of scientific evidence that countered his assertion or his argument, people still went with it because it was Thabo Mbeki. That's why it's an appeal to authority. It's you following something because this person says it's correct or let's go with it. You see it a lot in social media. Let's buy this brand because this person endorses it. Let's buy at this grocery store because this influencer shoots her videos in that store. That's an appeal to authority. It says nothing about the quality of the food there, nothing about the prices. You're literally just following the person. Make sense? Okay. Then, for sir there at the back, the Bible is true because it is the word of God. We know it is the word of God because the Bible says so. Ask your friend, what kind of logic do you think that is? What do you want to say? Yeah? What views are those?
I know this might be an appeal to religious authority or something.
Yeah. So so even if you looked at it not necessarily being about the Bible and God, look at how the argument is structured. Yeah.
That's the view.
What were you going to say?
This phone is purple. Why is it purple? Because the phone said it's purple.
Exactly.
Like
It's circular. You're using your conclusion as your premise. Does anyone have a guess for us? Let's listen. There's someone here in the front.
I would not agree with this statement. I believe in the Bible and I believe in God, but then the way the person backed it up, it's not sufficient. Probably they would have said, because of this, maybe the manifestation of a certain spiritual gifts make the word of God or proves it's the word of God, yeah.
You have something to add?
Oh, okay. I will then. I think I would discard or just not agree with the statement because it's basically a because I said so statement. So you're basically, what did we call it earlier? I think I would say it's along with the, which one was it? Appeal to ignorance, where in our view, we had seen it as saying that something is true in the absence of evidence to the contrary. So it's shifting the burden of proof to the other person. So you're then crafting the cyclical argument and framing an argument in a particular way such that an opposite perspective cannot even enter or make any inroads into what you're saying because you framed it in such a narrow manner.
Perfectly correct. So two scholars here are perfectly correct. It's the idea that, so don't look at it specifically on the religious part. One scholar said she is religious, so we're not atting religion. The idea here is how is this argument structured in order to prove the premise that is being presented. So the second scholar said it perfectly. We call this a circular argument because someone is using what they are trying to prove as part of the proof of that thing, when the conclusion of an argument is assumed in the premise. So when we look back here, the conclusion here is that the Bible is true, right? Then the premise that you're also assuming is because the Bible is true, then that's the word of God. Your conclusion can't be the same as your premise. Does that make sense? So let's say you're doing a scientific study, just to make it more tangible. Let's say you're doing a scientific study and you want to prove, let's say, this hormone is more effective in conception rate. It can increase your conception rate. But your hypothesis already says medication A is more effective in increasing conception rate. Therefore, this study will prove it's more effective in increasing conception rate. You are assuming what you are trying to conclude. What you're trying to discover can't be in your premise. You can have information that leads you to a decision, but you're first objective. Make sense? Okay. Next one. Students who score higher on the national benchmarking test. Did you guys do NBTs? Very traumatic for me. I didn't like that test. But students who score higher on the NBTs tend to have more access to technology in their schools. Therefore, access to technology causes higher test scores. Ask your friend. Oh, there was a very firm no there. Do you want to ask your friend about this one, or we can discuss it? You want to go first, sir? You said no first. Yeah. Go for it. Sorry. You can do it.
This one is a bit tricky. It's in my mind, but I'm still formulating a way to get it out there. Just because a majority of, or the biggest number, or the highest number of students got high marks have technology, does not mean the content that is studied in the NBT is a direct result of technology being present. So therefore, we can't say technology is a factor in terms of the high marks. I don't know if I'm making sense. Okay.
Does anyone else have something different? Yes, sir. Where's the other mic at the back? Oh, yeah. You have it already. Go for it.
Yeah. It's different, but not different. But what I'm saying is, it's the NBT. It's mathematics and more like English. So mathematics has nothing to do with technology per se. So if you say 1 + 1 is 2, I don't need a computer to do that if I know that it's 2. So that's baseless because it doesn't prove that it's technology.
Perfectly correct. Yes, ma'am. Okay, this will be the last time.
Okay, yeah? So I think it's something having to do with the cause and effect. Just because technology has positive impact on other things, so it's more like they're assuming that, okay, maybe the higher results or whatever, like the mark, is due to technology. Yeah. Do you understand? Yeah,
I do.
I think, yeah.
Perfectly correct. What you mentioned there in the beginning, it's causation versus correlation. It's when you think that because two things occur simultaneously, one must be the cause of the other. There's a difference between things happening in parallel and things causing each other to happen. Okay, that means that it might be true that students with more access to technology may perform better. So let's say that's the fact. They've told us those students perform better. It's a correlation that doesn't prove that access to technology directly causes higher test scores. There can be other factors that also correlate to technology, like socioeconomic status, like the quality of teaching and student motivation, that could influence the access to technology and academic performance. This is a trap that a lot of students fall into, especially during your literature review. So you're sitting there and you're like, this author said that this act in the Constitution makes people not be afraid to commit crime. Okay, that might be a correlation, but is it a direct reason where people are standing up and saying, this act will protect me, let me go steal a car? Do you see the difference? Causation versus correlation. Correlation means two things happen in parallel, they follow each other. Whether it's a positive correlation or negative. Inverse, remember inverse versus direct proportionality? Direct, it's that one on a slope, goes like this. So if that's the x-axis, that's the y-axis, if your line is going like that. As x increases, y increases. That's direct proportionality. Indirect is when that line is falling, which means that as x increases, y decreases. That's also a type of correlation, it's just as valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean causation. There's a difference. Okay. Last few. Argument 9, all bridges built using steel are stronger than bridges built using concrete. Read the wording in the argument. All bridges built using steel are stronger than bridges built using concrete. I know there's some of you from engineering here. Yes, sir, you have the mic. Go for it.
Sorry. The only problem that I see there is the word all. So now you've classified everything in one thing, and you have called it more weightier than the other. So you're not even considering the sizes. You're just classifying everything in just one group.
Perfectly correct. From life orientation, what's the word we use when someone does that? They assume a certain fact about a certain group of people or group of things in this. Stereotyping. Perfect. It's a sweeping generalization or stereotyping. It's when you make a sweeping statement and expect it to be true of every specific case. And that's what your scholar was saying now. The strength of a bridge depends on a whole lot of things. It's not just the material. So even when people use the argument, let's say women aren't as strong as men, therefore women should not be allowed in the army. There's a gap there. Even if you're saying on average, women might have a lower mean strength, that doesn't mean that there aren't some women who would even outperform men in the army. It's a stereotype. Okay, next one. Almost done. If we ban plastic bags, unemployment will increase because people won't have jobs in the plastic manufacturing industry. We've done a similar one, but it's different. Look for the nuance. Ask your friend. You can ask your friend. What do you think the problem with this argument is? You have a guess for us? Yeah, fallacies, still fallacies.
Yeah, this is false. For a lot of reasons. Plastics are not only used as plastic bags, for example. They're used in other areas. But also the idea that we won't have jobs, yeah, actually, no, that's actually the same thing. Like, okay, actually, the idea that unemployment will increase is what I wanted to prosecute. That's also a problem, because if you say unemployment will increase, yeah, in essence suggesting the overall unemployment rate will actually be affected by the plastic industry, of which may not be the case. Also, those people can move to other industries, possibly. And as you close this, and obviously people are still going to need bags. So as you close down this industry, some people will move into other industries. Yeah.
Okay, quickly showing you the answer. This is called a non sequitur, or it does not follow. And the idea there is you state as a conclusion something that does not strictly follow from the premises. So it's also called a problem solution gap. In high school, when you're teaching the high school debaters, it's a problem solution gap. Because you're saying, okay, there's this problem, this is the solution, but you don't tell us how did you get to that specific solution or conclusion from the problem you were analyzing. So, just like the scholar there said, the argument presents a conclusion that unemployment will increase that does not logically follow from the premise of banning plastic bags. So, banning plastic bags won't necessarily lead to unemployment in the plastic manufacturing industry because it can shift employment towards more sustainable alternatives like the Woolies bags. You know, the black Woolies bags that are more cloth? People can shift from plastic to more those cloth industries. But on top of that, recycling can also pick up. So at the point at which you're making a conclusion where someone reads the premise or the introduction of your sentence, but the conclusion, there's missing info in between there. That's a non sequitur. You're having a problem with critical thinking because you're not generating a logical conclusion. I think this is the last one. Oh, it's long. Okay. It says, Senator Clark, so people in the US, why are you not willing to support the anti-abortion amendment? Don't you have any feelings at all for the unborn children whose lives are being indiscriminately blotted out? Another senator says, I just don't understand why you people who get so worked up about lives being blotted out by abortion don't have the same feelings about the thousands of lives that are blotted out every year by the indiscriminate use of handguns. Is not the issue of the sanctity of human life involved in both issues? Why have you not supported us in our efforts at gun control legislation? A lot of you frowned. What do you think that is? The lady with the scarf already has her hand up. Sorry, we're running out of time. That's all I'm just going.
Okay, I don't know which type of fallacy this is.
Go for it. How
but
do you describe
I
it?
agree with Senator Rich's statement.
Okay.
You cannot extend the right to life to something that is not yet born.
Okay.
So anti-abortion, basically, you are not protecting a life, you are protecting a fetus.
Okay.
So the better way to protect a life is by protecting people who have rights and are already
here
alive. Yes.
Okay. Can we pass the mic here so long and then you come?
Well, I'm just going to say the topic is about abortion, but what he has done now is shifted it from abortion to something else. So he's not addressing that question. He's giving me something else.
Thank you.
Using the definition she provided, can we call it a red herring fallacy?
Why is it red herring?
Because Senator Rich is distracting Senator Clark from the initial point or argument that she had raised.
Something similar? Okay, go for it.
I disagree with both, or rather, I have an issue with both. So, Rich points out that Clark is having a problem there because they seem to be focusing on the issue of unborn children without paying any mind to gun control, which also speaks to that matter of the sanctity of life. But now, in responding, my issue with Rich also is that he doesn't actually speak to the issue of abortion. So he's basically saying, no, I may be wrong, but you're wrong because I'm right in this sense. So you're wrong because I'm right. So don't look at why I'm wrong. Let's actually, yes, that distraction thing, but they're both actually not being honest because they're not speaking to the actual sanctity of life issue. So it's just passing the buck.
Yes, up and down. Perfectly correct. The other scholar who named it, it's a red herring, where you introduce irrelevant facts or argument to distract from the question at hand. So yes, as much as Senator Clark first speaks about anti-abortion, Senator Rich is supposed to talk about why does Senator Rich not support the anti-abortion amendment. He's not supposed to be bringing in other things about handgun legislation and control. That can be an addition, but to discount Senator Clark's argument, he first has to handle the anti-abortion argument before he adds in other anti-life harming policies. Okay. I think, I promise it's the last one, sorry. If we allow genetically modified organisms to be cultivated, it would lead to widespread environmental devastation and uncontrollable mutations in the ecosystem. Is that correct? Why?
I would not agree with that because I've done genetically modified organisms before, and it's not the only cause of mutations. So this person didn't actually analyze the other things that lead to the mutations, but yeah, I think that's the thing.
Okay, just to add to what she said, looking at the statement, the person did not provide proof as to why they say all that.
There's no evidence or backing. Yes.
I was going to say the same thing, like the relationship isn't defined. What's the relationship between GMOs and environmental devastation and mutations in the ecosystem?
Yeah, perfectly correct. It's the idea of a slippery slope. High schoolers are terrible at this because they'll give you a policy that says we're going to restrict economic or let's say environmental pollution. Then all of a sudden, no one has a job, everyone is starving, no one can afford to go to school. It's a slippery slope because you're saying it's an argument that says adopting one policy or taking one action would lead to another series of policies or action also being taken without showing a causal connection between that advocated policy and consequent ones. It's slippery. Like, imagine sliding down a slope, like a side of a mountain. You trip at the top, and all of a sudden, by the time you're hitting the floor, you're broken. That's a slippery slope. You reach these very strange conclusions without showing how is it that you're moving on to the next one. Yes, that was the last one. This is the list of logical fallacies. Please remember, this is minimal at best. There are people whose entire debating careers are dedicated to breaking down not just these, but even other categories of logical fallacies. But the gist of this, and this is where I conclude, it's the idea that in this session, you've learned what is debating, more in the formal sense of you being involved more at a SASDB level or WUDC level. But apart from that, you've also kind of made the link between what debating skills may be relevant to your degree. Even if you don't go to UPDU, I would like you to if you'd like to. But even if you don't, what skills could different activities, different sports possibly teach you? But more than anything, you've practiced identifying different logical fallacies. Practice is absolutely crucial. That's why when you're writing, that block you have when you open your Word document and you just can't get those words flowing in your dissertation, that's practice. Get to a point where you're just like, I will type no matter what. That's practice. Getting over that mental hurdle and even just your feedback response to not wanting to write, that takes practice. Critical thinking also takes practice. Thank you.